I'm standing in my kitchen in Atlanta, heating up leftovers for another dinner alone, and I still can't believe I'm telling anyone this. 10 years. That's how long I thought Marcus was dead. 10 years of wearing black to church, of explaining to people at the grocery store why my husband wasn't around anymore, of living like a widow at 34 years old. And then a hospital bill came to my apartment above the closed storefront on Peachtree Street, and everything I thought I knew about my life just shattered. I need you to understand something first. I'm sharing this because I think there are other women out there who might be going through something similar, and maybe hearing what happened to me will help you recognize what's happening in your own life. If this resonates with you, please leave a like and subscribe so this message can reach someone who desperately needs to hear it. You might be saving someone's life today. Marcus and I got married young. I was 24 and he had this dream about getting an Audi A8 in graphite gray someday. That car meant everything to him. It represented success, respect, arrival. I believed in that dream too. I believed in him. We lived in this neighborhood on the block with all the apartment buildings, kids playing outside all day during summer, and I was happy. I had my routines. Every morning I'd wake up in my royal purple robe and heat up water for coffee. The ceramic cookie jar shaped like a house sat on my kitchen counter, filled with the oatmeal cookies I'd make every Sunday. I played dominoes with friends from church on Saturday afternoons. I had a life. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with him. We were at my cousin's backyard barbecue, and he was talking to my uncle about building his own business, about creating generational wealth for his future family. His eyes lit up when he spoke about his dreams, and I thought, this is a man who knows where he's going. This is a man who will take care of me. He wore this cologne that smelled like cedar, and something sweet I could never quite place. When he asked me to dance that night, right there in the grass with the string lights above us and Frankie Beverly playing from someone's portable speaker, I felt like I'd found my person. Our wedding was small but beautiful. We couldn't afford much, but my church family came through with decorations, food, love. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit me. Marcus wore a suit he'd borrowed from his cousin, but he looked like a king to me. When he said his vows, promising to love me, honor me, build a life with me, I cried. Real tears of joy. I believed every word. I believed in us. The first year was good. Not perfect, but good. We'd stay up late talking about our future, about the house we'd buy someday, the children we'd have. He'd run his fingers through my hair and tell me I was his queen, his everything. We'd cook together on Sunday afternoons, him seasoning the meat while I prepared the sides. We'd dance in our tiny kitchen, laughing when we bumped into the counter or knocked over a dish towel. Those moments felt sacred. They felt real. I remember one night in particular, maybe 6 months into our marriage. We were lying in bed, and a storm was rolling through Atlanta. The thunder shook our windows, and lightning lit up our bedroom in flashes. I was scared of storms back then, always had been since I was a child. Marcus pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me, and hummed this song his grandmother used to sing. He stayed awake with me until the storm passed, just holding me, making me feel safe. That's the Marcus I married. That's the man I thought I knew. But slowly, God, how do I explain this without sounding stupid? Slowly, he started changing. I mean, I didn't see it happening in real time. It was more like waking up one day and realizing the person next to you had become someone else. He got involved with someone at work. She was younger, flashier, exactly the kind of woman who laughed at his jokes about the Audi like it was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. And instead of fighting for me, instead of doing what a husband is supposed to do, he just replaced me. That's the only word for it. I was pushed aside like yesterday's trash. The first time I saw her was at his company's summer picnic. I'd spent all morning getting ready, wanting to look good for him, wanting to remind him why he'd fallen in love with me. I wore this yellow sundress I'd saved up for, did my hair the way he used to like it. But when we got there, he barely introduced me to anyone. He kept finding excuses to walk away, to talk to other people, to be anywhere but next to me. And then I saw him with her, laughing at something she'd said, touching her arm in that familiar way he used to touch mine. My stomach dropped. I knew. Even before I had proof, I knew. I confronted him that night. We were driving home, the sun setting over the highway, painting everything in shades of orange and red. I asked him who she was. He said just a coworker, nothing to worry about. Asked me why I was being so insecure, so jealous. Made me feel like I was crazy for noticing what was right in front of me. That was the first time he used that tactic, making me doubt my own eyes, my own instincts. It wouldn't be the last. The summer heat pressed down on everything that July, making the whole world move in slow motion. The fan spun all day, and I still felt like I couldn't breathe. I'd stand at my kitchen window looking down at the busy street below, watching people go about their normal lives, and I'd wonder when mine had stopped being normal. The apartment above the closed storefront had become my prison, and I didn't even realize I was locked in. I stayed, though. I know that sounds crazy now, but you have to understand where my head was. I was only in my mid-20s, and I felt like I was already too old to start over. Like I was powerless. Like this was just what happened to women like me. My kitchen had my ceramic cookie jar shaped like a house on the counter, the collection of funeral programs from people I'd lost stacked on the shelf, and I just kept stirring the pot of ham hocks simmering with green beans, telling myself that maybe things would get better, that maybe I just wasn't enough yet. I started trying harder. That's what women do, right? When something goes wrong, we examine ourselves first. I woke up earlier to make him breakfast. I made sure his clothes were always clean and pressed. I stopped complaining when he came home late or didn't come home at all. I became smaller, quieter, more convenient. I thought if I could just be better, be perfect, he'd see me again. He'd remember why he loved me. The isolation happened so slowly I almost didn't notice it. He didn't want me seeing my friends anymore. Said they were a bad influence, always filling my head with nonsense. He cut me off from my family too, telling me they didn't understand our relationship, our vision for the future. I gave up everything that made me me, thinking that somehow, if I was small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, he'd love me again. I remember the last time I played dominoes with my church friends. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Marcus called me 6 times in 2 hours. Each call got angrier. By the time I got home, he'd thrown my dominoes in the trash. Said I was wasting time with people who didn't matter when I should be supporting him, supporting his dreams. I never went back to those Saturday games. That's the sacrifice that eats you alive. You don't realize you're making it until you've already lost yourself. Teresa noticed first. She'd call me, and I'd make excuses. Too busy, too tired. Marcus needed me for something. One time, she came by the apartment unannounced. I answered the door still in my nightgown at 3 in the afternoon, hair unwashed, eyes hollow. She looked at me with such concern, such love. And I almost broke down right there. Almost told her everything. But Marcus came to the door behind me, put his hand on my shoulder in what anyone else would think was affection, and told her I wasn't feeling well, that maybe another time would be better. The pressure of his fingers on my shoulder was a warning. I said goodbye to Teresa and closed the door, and I didn't see her again for almost 10 years. I used to cook big Sunday dinners, ham hocks simmering with green beans, cornbread from scratch, sweet tea so cold it made your teeth hurt. I'd set the table with my good dishes, the ones my grandmother gave me, and wait for Marcus to come home. Sometimes he'd show up. Most times he wouldn't. But I kept cooking anyway, kept setting that table, kept believing that this was what marriage looked like, that this was what love required. One Sunday I cooked for 6 hours, made all his favorites, set the table with candles, put on a nice dress, did my makeup. 6 o'clock came and went. 7. 8. I called his phone a dozen times. Finally, at 10:30 at night, he walked through the door smelling like her perfume, like another woman's bed. He looked at the cold food on the table, at me still sitting there in my dress with mascara running down my face, And he had the audacity to ask why I was being so dramatic. Said he'd told me he had to work late. Said I never listened. Said I was always making something out of nothing. I stopped cooking Sunday dinners after that. My faith was supposed to sustain me through it all. I had my collection of funeral programs stacked on the shelf, reminders of people who'd passed, people who'd loved me unconditionally. I'd read them sometimes, looking at the faces of my grandmother, my uncle, my cousin who died too young, and I'd wonder what they'd think of who I'd become. Would they recognize me? Would they be proud? Or would they see what I was too blind to see, that I was disappearing inch by inch? My grandmother had raised me to be strong, independent. She'd worked 2 jobs after my grandfather died, raised 3 children on her own, never asked anyone for help she didn't absolutely need. She used to tell me, "Baby, a woman who can't take care of herself is a woman who's always at someone else's mercy." I'd forgotten that lesson. Or maybe I'd never really learned it in the first place. Either way, I knew she'd be disappointed in who I'd become. This hollow version of myself. This woman who waited by the window for a man who didn't care if she lived or died. The money was always tight. Marcus controlled everything, every dollar, every cent. He said it was because he was building toward something, saving for that Audi, creating wealth for our future. I believed him. I worked 2 jobs and handed over my paychecks, trusting that he was managing our finances, building our net worth, securing our future. I never saw bank statements, never questioned where the money went. I just trusted. I worked as a receptionist during the day and cleaned offices at night. I'd come home smelling like industrial cleaner, my hands raw and red, my back aching. Marcus would barely look up from his phone, wouldn't ask about my day. Wouldn't notice the exhaustion written all over my face. I'd hand him my check, and he'd deposit it into our account, the one only he had access to. When I asked about getting my own card, about being able to see where our money was going, he'd get angry. Ask me why I didn't trust him. Ask me if I thought he was stealing from his own wife. Make me feel guilty for even wondering. One time I tried to buy groceries with my debit card and it was declined. I was standing in line at the store, people behind me waiting, the cashier looking at me with pity. I called Marcus, humiliated, and he acted surprised. Said there must be some mistake. Gave me cash when I got home but never explained where the money had gone. I learned not to ask. Learned not to question. Learned not to exist outside of what he allowed me to exist within. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way he'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. The hushed phone calls in the bathroom. The weekends he spent working late on projects that never seemed to materialize. The gradual erosion of everything that made me feel human. But at the time, I explained it all away. I made excuses. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, demanding too much. My royal purple robe became like armor. Every morning I'd put it on and pretend I was someone who had her life together, someone who wasn't slowly dying inside her own marriage. I'd heat up leftovers because I'd stopped cooking real meals. What was the point? Marcus was never home anyway, and when he was, he barely looked at me. I'd become furniture in my own life, something he moved around to make room for what really mattered to him. The ceramic cookie jar sat empty most days. I'd stopped baking, stopped doing the small things that used to bring me joy. The apartment above the closed storefront felt like a metaphor for my entire existence. Something that used to be open, alive, full of possibility, now shuttered and dark. The kids still played outside on the block, their laughter drifting up through my windows, but it felt like it was coming from another world, one I no longer had access to. I'd watch those kids sometimes, wonder if I'd ever have my own. Marcus and I used to talk about having children. 3, we'd decided. 2 boys and a girl. We even had names picked out. But that conversation had stopped happening years ago. And honestly, by that point, I was grateful we didn't have kids. At least I was only destroying myself, not bringing innocent children into this nightmare. It was summer when everything fell apart. That oppressive Atlanta summer where the heat makes everything slow down and the fan spins all day, but you still can't breathe. I was at my cousin's birthday celebration, one of the few family events I was still allowed to attend. Someone asked me about a hospital bill. They said they'd seen Marcus's name on something at work, something recent. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I couldn't move. My body shut down completely. I stood there in the middle of that celebration, people laughing and eating and celebrating life, and I felt like I was dying. My cousin kept asking if I was okay, but I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there while the world spun around me. "You look like you've seen a ghost," my cousin said, touching my arm gently. The concern in her eyes was real, deep. "Should I call someone? Do you need to sit down?" I shook my head, forced words out of my mouth. "What did you say? About Marcus? About a hospital bill?" She looked confused. "One of the girls at my office was processing insurance claims and she said she saw his name. I told her that wasn't possible, that he'd been gone for years. But she insisted, said it was from a hospital in South Carolina, just a few months ago. I figured it must be a mistake, some kind of identity mix-up, but the way you're looking right now..." She trailed off, studying my face. "There's something you're not telling me." I left the party immediately, drove home in a daze, nearly ran 2 red lights. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I kept thinking about that hospital bill, about Marcus's name, about South Carolina. We'd never even been to South Carolina. When I got home, I tore through everything. Every document, every paper, every old file box in our storage closet. I'd never looked before, never had reason to question, but now I was looking. Really looking. And what I found made my blood run cold. When I finally found the courage to dig into it, I discovered the truth. Marcus had faked his death. 10 years ago, he'd staged an accident, gotten declared dead by the courts, and disappeared with that new woman. He'd taken money, assets, everything. Every dollar I'd earned, every bit of wealth I thought we were building together, gone. And then, like some kind of sick joke, a hospital bill showed up with his signature on it from 6 months ago. But finding that out wasn't a single moment. It was a process. I spent 3 days locked in my apartment, going through every piece of paper, every receipt, every old statement I could find. I created timelines on notebook paper spread across my living room floor. I made phone calls to banks, to insurance companies, to anyone who might have a record of what happened 10 years ago. The accident had been reported on a Tuesday morning. Marcus had supposedly been driving to a business meeting in Alabama. His car was found burned out on the side of the highway, the body inside burned beyond recognition. Dental records had confirmed it was him. Except now I knew it couldn't have been. Someone else had died in that car. Someone else had been burned beyond recognition. Someone else's family was probably still wondering where their son, brother, father had gone. The more I dug, the more horrifying it became. He'd planned this for months, maybe years. The business he'd claimed to be building, that was real, but it was in her name. The investments he'd talked about? Those existed too, but I had no access to them, no legal claim. He'd systematically moved everything out of my reach while keeping me too busy, too isolated, too exhausted to notice. The insurance payout alone had been substantial. $500,000. I'd never seen a cent of it. He'd told me it was tied up in legal proceedings, that it would take time, that I just needed to be patient. And I'd believed him because at that point I still thought he was dead. We'd had a funeral. I'd buried an empty casket. I'd mourned him. He was alive. He'd always been alive. He'd let me bury him while he was living his best life somewhere else, probably driving that Audi A8 he'd always dreamed about, spending my money, my income, the fortune I'd helped him build. I found photos. That was the worst part. I found photos on an old social media account he thought he'd hidden. Him and her, living in Charleston, South Carolina. Living in a beautiful house with a water view. Him wearing expensive clothes, her draped in jewelry. And that Audi. That fucking graphite gray Audi A8 parked in their driveway like a trophy, like proof that he'd won. In one photo, they were on a beach at sunset, his arms around her waist, both of them laughing. The caption said, 5 years strong. 5 years ago, I'd been wearing black to his memorial service on the anniversary of his supposed death. I'd been standing in a cemetery, placing flowers on an empty grave, crying for a man who was on a beach in South Carolina with his new life, his new woman, his new reality built on my broken back. I won't lie to you. I broke, completely shattered. I couldn't function for weeks. I'd sit in my apartment staring at that ceramic cookie jar, remembering the woman I used to be, the woman who baked cookies and played dominoes and believed in love. I'd pull out those funeral programs and add Marcus's fake one to the pile, the one from the service I'd attended, the one where I'd cried real tears for a man who wasn't even dead. I stopped showering, stopped eating anything that required more effort than opening a container. I'd wake up on the couch, not remembering how I got there, the TV still playing whatever had been on when I'd passed out. I ignored calls from work until they stopped calling, ignored my landlord's notices about rent until eviction became a real possibility. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered. I thought about ending it. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. I stood in my bathroom one night, the fan spinning overhead, and I thought about how easy it would be to just not exist anymore, to stop feeling this pain, this betrayal, this crushing weight of having been erased from my own life. I had pills in the cabinet. I had a plan. I had nothing left to live for. The heat that summer was unbearable. The fan spun and spun and spun, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. I'd heat up leftovers and not eat them. I'd put on my royal purple robe and not leave the apartment. I'd stare at the busy street below and wonder how everyone else was just going about their lives while mine had completely imploded. But then Teresa called. Teresa, my old friend from church, the one I used to play dominoes with every Saturday. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade because Marcus had isolated me so completely, had convinced me she was toxic, that she didn't have my best interests at heart. She heard through someone at church what had happened, and she just showed up. I almost didn't answer the door. I was in bad shape, and I knew it. But she kept knocking, kept calling my name through the door, and finally I opened it. She took one look at me and tears filled her eyes. She didn't say anything at first, just pushed past me into the apartment, set down the bags she was carrying, and pulled me into a hug. I crumbled in her arms, sobbed like a child, let out 10 years of grief and pain and betrayal. She brought food, real food, not leftovers. Ham hocks simmering with green beans, cornbread, sweet tea. She sat with me in my kitchen and didn't say anything at first, just let me cry. And when I was done crying, when I'd run out of tears, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "This wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." I didn't believe her at first. How could it not be my fault? I'd been the fool who believed him, the idiot who handed over every paycheck, the naive girl who thought love meant sacrifice and suffering. "Look at me," Teresa said, her voice firm but gentle. She grabbed both my hands, held them tight. "What happened to you was abuse. That man systematically destroyed you so he could take everything and disappear. That's not love gone wrong. That's calculated evil, and you survived it. Do you hear me? You survived." Her words cracked something open inside me, made space for a truth I hadn't been able to see. I wasn't weak. I was surviving something designed to destroy me. Teresa helped me realize I wasn't crazy or stupid. She helped me understand that what happened to me was deliberate, calculated abuse. That the isolation, the control, the gradual erosion of my identity, all of it was intentional. Marcus had systematically destroyed me so he could take everything and disappear. And I'd let him because I believed I was powerless. Too old at 24 to start over, too broken to deserve better. She started coming over every day. We'd sit at my kitchen table and she'd help me piece together what had happened. We went through financial records, bank statements I'd never seen, documents Marcus had hidden. The business he claimed to be building? Fake. The investments he said would secure our future? Non-existent. The net worth he'd promised we were creating together? He'd stolen it all and used it to start a new life with someone else. We created spreadsheets, timelines, documentation of every lie, every stolen dollar, every manipulative conversation I could remember. Teresa was meticulous, organized. She'd been through something similar with her first husband, though not to this extreme. She knew what I needed to do, knew how to help me build a case. "You're going to feel like giving up," she told me one afternoon while we were sorting through bank statements. "You're going to feel like this is too much, that it's easier to just let him get away with it. But I need you to push through that feeling. I need you to fight, not for revenge, for justice, for your future, for every other woman who might cross his path." Teresa helped me find a lawyer, a good one who specialized in fraud. She helped me document everything, every lie, every manipulation, every dollar that had disappeared. And then she said something that changed everything. She said, "You need to make him face what he did, not for him, for you." The lawyer's name was Patricia Williams, and she was exactly the kind of woman I needed. Mid-50s, sharp as a knife, with gray hair she wore natural and short. She sat across from me in her office overlooking downtown Atlanta, reading through everything I'd brought, and her expression got darker and darker. "This is one of the most egregious cases of fraud I've seen in 20 years of practice," she finally said, looking up at me. "And I've seen some terrible things. The fact that he faked his death, collected insurance money, left you to mourn while he built a new life? That's not just civil fraud, that's criminal." "Can we get him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's smile was cold and sharp. "Honey, we're going to bury him." That's when I decided to fight back. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I wasn't going to let him keep living his life in peace while I rotted in this apartment above a closed storefront, still wearing black like a widow, still grieving a death that never happened. I set up a meeting with him through his new woman, the one he'd replaced me with. I told her I'd found some old documents of his, important papers about his inheritance, his family's wealth. I knew she'd make him come. Money always made Marcus move. I recorded everything. Our entire conversation, every word that came out of his lying mouth. Getting him to come took strategy. I had to make the bait irresistible. So I mentioned specific numbers, specific accounts that I'd found documentation for. His mother had passed away 3 years ago, and there was actually a small inheritance. He wouldn't have known that I knew about it. I made it sound like there was more, like I'd stumbled onto something valuable that I didn't understand but thought he might want. He took 3 days to respond. 3 days of me checking my phone every 5 minutes, wondering if he'd take the bait. When his new woman finally called me, her voice was sweet, dripping with fake sympathy. "Marcus told me about your situation," she said, as if I were some charity case. "He's willing to help you with these documents. He always did have a soft spot for you." I wanted to scream. Wanted to reach through the phone and shake her. Did she know? Was she complicit? Or was she just another victim, another woman he'd manipulated into believing his lies? "That's so kind of him," I said, matching her fake sweetness with my own. "Would Thursday work? There's a coffee shop downtown I like." He showed up in that Audi A8, graphite gray, just like he'd always dreamed. He looked good. Healthy, successful, like a man who'd made all the right choices in life. He didn't even have the decency to look guilty when he saw me. Just smiled that same smile he used to give me when we were young, when I still believed in him. I watched him park through the coffee shop window, watched him check himself in the rearview mirror, adjust his shirt collar, run his hand over his hair. He looked like he was going to a business meeting, not a confrontation with the wife he'd left for dead. My hands were shaking. I had a recording device in my purse, a small one Patricia had given me. "Legal in Georgia," she'd assured me, as long as I was part of the conversation. We sat in a coffee shop downtown, public enough that he couldn't make a scene. I asked him why. Why fake his death? Why take everything? Why let me suffer for 10 years thinking he was gone? He ordered a coffee first. Actually sat there and ordered a coffee like we were old friends catching up. Made small talk with the barista, complimented her tattoo. When he finally sat down across from me, he looked relaxed, comfortable, like he had every right to be there. "You look good," he said, which was a lie. I looked terrible and we both knew it. "I heard you've been having a rough time." "You heard?" I repeated. "From who? From the life you faked your death to escape from?" He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Said he needed a fresh start. Said I was holding him back. Said the woman he was with now understood him in ways I never could. Said he deserved to be happy, to live the life he'd always wanted. And the money? That was just business. Nothing personal. "You were always so emotional," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "So needy. I was drowning in that marriage. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't be who I needed to be." "So you killed yourself?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "You let me bury an empty casket? You let me mourn you for 10 years? "I let you move on," he corrected. "I gave you freedom. Most women would be grateful." The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity of this man. "And the money?" I pressed. "My paychecks? The years I worked 2 jobs? The insurance payout?" "Like I said, just business. I built something real with that money, created actual wealth. You would have just wasted it on." He waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever it is you do. Nothing personal. 10 years of my life. My 20s, gone. My trust, shattered. My ability to believe in love, destroyed. And it was nothing personal." "I forgive you," I said suddenly, watching his face. He looked surprised, pleased even. Probably thought I was still that same naive girl he'd married. "I forgive you for being exactly who you are, a coward, a thief. A man so small and pathetic that the only way he could feel big was to destroy someone who loved him." His face darkened. "Watch yourself. You don't know what I'm capable of." "Is that a threat?" I asked sweetly, making sure my voice was clear for the recording. "Are you threatening me, Marcus?" He seemed to realize his mistake. Leaned back, forced a smile. "Of course not. I'm just saying, you should move on. We both have. Let the past stay in the past." I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't give him the satisfaction. I just smiled and thanked him for being honest. And then I told him I'd be in touch. The trap was set. I brought everything to my family during Thanksgiving dinner that year. Teresa came with me for support. I stood up in front of everyone, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, people who'd attended Marcus's funeral, who'd held me while I cried, who'd watched me mourn, and I told them the truth. The turkey was on the table, sweet potato pie cooling on the counter, and I stood at the head of the table and cleared my throat. The room went quiet. My hands were shaking, but Teresa squeezed my shoulder, gave me strength. "Before we eat, there's something I need to tell you all," I began. Something about Marcus. I could see the discomfort on their faces. Nobody wanted to talk about my dead husband at Thanksgiving. But I pressed on. I played the recording. Let them hear his voice, his casual admission of fraud, his complete lack of remorse. And then I showed them the documents, the hospital bill with his signature, the bank statements showing where all our money had gone, the evidence of the new life he'd built while I barely survived. My family exploded. My uncle, who'd always liked Marcus, who'd called him son, looked like he wanted to kill him. My cousin, whose birthday celebration had started this whole discovery, was crying. Everyone was talking at once, demanding to know where he was, what we were going to do about it. "Where is he?" my uncle demanded, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. Where is this sorry excuse for a man? Does he know you found out? My aunt asked, reaching for my hand across the table. What can we do? My cousin said through tears. Tell us what you need. But I was calm. For the first time in 10 years, I was completely calm, because I knew what was coming. I'd already filed the police report, already contacted the fraud division, already reached out to his employer with evidence of his fake death, already sent everything to his new woman, the one he'd replaced me with, along with proof that he'd been lying to her too, that the money he'd been spending on her, the fortune he'd claimed to have earned, it was all stolen from me. It's already done, I said quietly. Everything's in motion. I just needed you all to know the truth. I needed you to hear it from me, to understand what really happened. Patricia had helped me orchestrate it perfectly. Everything hit him simultaneously, like dominoes falling one after another. The police report triggered an investigation. The fraud division froze accounts. His employer, a financial services firm that couldn't afford the scandal of employing a man who'd faked his death for insurance money, terminated him immediately. And his new woman, confronted with evidence that everything he'd told her was a lie, that the life they'd built was constructed on stolen money and fraudulent documents, she left him. It all came down on him at the same time. The woman he was with left him, took half of what he had left, which was poetic justice in its own way. His employer fired him, threatened legal action for fraud. The courts reopened my case, started the process of declaring him legally alive again, which meant all the insurance money he'd collected, all the benefits he'd claimed, all of it had to be returned, with interest. I got updates from Patricia every few days. Marcus had hired a lawyer, but there wasn't much the man could do. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording alone was damning, but combined with everything else, with the paper trail, the testimony I'd given, the documentation Teresa and I had compiled, he didn't have a leg to stand on. He's trying to claim diminished capacity, Patricia told me during one of our meetings. Says he was having a mental health crisis 10 years ago, that he wasn't in his right mind. And it won't work. The planning was too detailed, too deliberate. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was calculated fraud. The prosecutor is pushing for jail time. And me. I sat in my apartment above the closed storefront, wearing my royal purple robe, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like I could breathe. The fan spun in the summer heat, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like movement, like progress, like the beginning of something new. I started taking care of myself again. Small things at first. Showering every day, eating real meals, opening my curtains to let sunlight in. I cleaned my apartment, threw away things that reminded me of Marcus, of who I'd been when I was with him. I painted my bedroom a soft blue, nothing he would have approved of. I bought new sheets, new pillows, made my space mine again. The months that followed were hard in different ways. I had to learn how to be myself again, had to remember who I was before Marcus. Teresa helped with that too. She brought back my dominoes, the ones Marcus had thrown away. She'd saved them all those years, kept them safe, waiting for the day I'd be ready to play again. I knew you'd come back, she said when she handed me the box. I knew you'd find your way out eventually, and I wanted to make sure these were here waiting for you. I cried holding that box of dominoes, cried for the girl I'd been, for the years I'd lost, for the friendship that had endured despite everything. We started having Saturday afternoon games again, just like we used to. But it wasn't just Teresa anymore. Other women from church joined us, women who'd been through their own versions of what I'd experienced. We became each other's support system, each other's chosen family. We shared stories, advice, laughter. We rebuilt ourselves together. There was Diane, who'd left her husband after 30 years when she discovered he'd been embezzling from her family's business. There was Jennifer, younger than me, who'd escaped a man who'd tried to convince her she was mentally ill to cover his own affairs. There was Patricia, not my lawyer, but a different Patricia, who'd lost everything to a man she'd trusted completely. Each of them had their own story, their own scars, their own hard-won wisdom. We met every Saturday afternoon religiously. Sometimes we played dominoes. Sometimes we just talked, drank sweet tea, ate whatever someone had brought. We celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small. Diane getting her business back, Jennifer finishing her degree, Patricia buying her own house, the first thing she'd ever owned outright. I learned something crucial during that time, something I wish someone had taught me when I was 24 and naive and in love. I learned about financial protection, about keeping your assets separate, about documenting everything, about never letting anyone, no matter how much you love them, control your entire financial life. I learned that isolation is always the first warning sign. When someone starts cutting you off from friends, from family, from the people who love you unconditionally, that's not love, that's control. And control is just abuse with better PR. I learned that age is just a number. I'd felt too old at 24 to start over. Now I was 34, actually starting over, and I felt younger than I had in years. Because I was free. Actually free. Not the fake freedom of being alone, but still mentally imprisoned. Real freedom. The kind that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. The ceramic cookie jar got filled again. I started baking on Sundays, making those oatmeal cookies I used to love. I'd bring them to church, share them with my new tribe, my chosen family. The collection of funeral programs stayed on my shelf, but I added something new next to them. A small framed photo of me and Teresa at our first dominoes game after everything happened. Both of us laughing, genuinely happy. A reminder that life continues, that joy is possible, that resurrection doesn't require death, just the courage to walk away from what's killing you. I started planning my future differently. No more building wealth for someone else. No more sacrificing my present for a future that would never come. I opened my own accounts, started saving for myself, set aside money for the cabin in the mountains I'd always dreamed about. The one with a porch and a view where I could sit in peace and watch the seasons change. I went to see it once, that cabin. Drove up to the mountains on a Saturday when I had nothing else to do. It was for sale, had been on the market for a while. The realtor met me there, showed me around. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with windows that looked out over the valley. The porch was everything I'd imagined, wide enough for a rocking chair and a small table, positioned perfectly to catch the sunset. I can't afford it yet, I told the realtor honestly. But someday this is where I'm going to end up. She smiled at me, understanding in her eyes. I'll keep you in mind if the price drops. Marcus tried to contact me a few times after everything fell apart for him. Called from numbers I didn't recognize. Showed up at my apartment once. I didn't answer, didn't engage. The most powerful thing I ever did was turn off my phone for a whole day and just exist without him trying to worm his way back into my life. The time he showed up at my apartment, I was ready. Patricia had helped me get a restraining order, so legally he wasn't supposed to be there. I called the police from behind my locked door while he knocked and pleaded and promised he could explain everything. "Baby, please," he said through the door. "You don't understand. I can make this right. Just give me a chance to explain." I said nothing, just waited for the police to arrive, watched through my peephole as they escorted him away. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The fancy clothes couldn't hide what he'd become. A man with nothing, no one, nowhere to go. The legal process took time. Recovering the money, clearing my name, rebuilding my credit. But I did it. Every step, every document, every court appearance. I showed up for myself in ways I never had before. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I built a new life. The settlement took 18 months to finalize. Marcus fought it every step of the way, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, I recovered most of what he'd stolen, plus damages, plus legal fees. It wasn't everything, couldn't give me back the years I'd lost, but it was something. It was justice. I reconnected with family members I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I apologized to friends I'd abandoned because Marcus told me to. Most of them understood. Some didn't. That was okay too. I was learning that not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Sometimes it's just making room for better people. My cousin, the one whose birthday had started all this, became one of my closest friends. We'd have lunch every other week, just talking, catching up on the years we'd missed. She told me she'd always suspected something was wrong with Marcus, but she didn't know how to reach me, didn't want to overstep. "I wish I'd tried harder," she said once, tears in her eyes. "You couldn't have saved me," I told her. "I had to save myself." The apartment above the closed storefront didn't feel like a prison anymore. I painted the walls, bright colors that Marcus would have hated. I hung artwork, bought new furniture, made it mine. The neighborhood with the apartment buildings and kids playing outside became my community again, instead of just a place I existed. I learned my neighbors' names, joined them for summer barbecues, let myself be part of something bigger than my own pain. There was Mrs. Chen next door, who brought me dumplings when she cooked extra. There was Jerome downstairs, who helped me fix my leaky faucet and wouldn't let me pay him. There was the family across the hall with 3 kids who were loud and messy and full of life, who reminded me what normal families looked like. I even started a small side business, baking cookies and selling them at the farmer's market on weekends. Nothing huge, nothing that would make me millions, but something that was mine. Something that brought me joy and a little extra income. Something Marcus could never touch, never control, never take away. The first weekend at the farmer's market was terrifying. I set up my little table with samples of oatmeal cookies, chocolate chip, snickerdoodles. I'd been up since 4 in the morning baking, making sure everything was perfect. The first few hours were slow. People would walk by, maybe take a sample, keep moving. But then an older woman stopped, tried a cookie, and her whole face lit up. "These taste like my grandmother used to make," she said. "I'll take 3 boxes." I sold out by noon, came home with an empty table and a cash box full of small bills, and I felt like I'd conquered the world. The summer heat still comes every year, still makes everything slow down, still requires the fan to spin all day. But now, when I stand in my kitchen heating up leftovers, which I do less often because I'm cooking real meals again, I don't feel alone. I feel independent. There's a difference. 10 years. That's how long I lived as a ghost in my own life. And then a hospital bill arrived with Marcus's signature, and I woke up. I came back to life. I learned that you can resurrect yourself without anyone's permission, that strength isn't about never falling down, but about getting back up, that the most radical thing a woman can do is refuse to disappear. Now I'm 34 and I'm just beginning. I have my chosen family, my faith, my dreams. I have that cabin in the mountains waiting for me, maybe not this year, but someday. I have peace. Real, hard-won, beautiful peace. And I have myself back, the parts of me I thought were dead, buried under years of manipulation and control and slow, deliberate erasure. I think about Marcus sometimes, wonder if he ever really understands what he did. Probably not. People like that rarely do. They're too busy playing victim, rewriting history, blaming everyone else for their choices. But that's not my problem anymore. He's not my problem anymore. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Columbia, South Carolina, working at a car wash. The Audi got repossessed. The house got foreclosed. The woman he'd left me for had left him for someone else. Someone with actual money.
Karma works in mysterious ways. What I want you to understand is that this story isn't unique. I'm not special. This happens to women all the time, in different ways, with different details, but the same basic pattern: control, isolation, manipulation, theft, abandonment, and then the long, painful journey back to yourself. Research with Latinos in the U.S. shows that 39% of seniors experienced some type of abuse. 39%. That's not a small number. That's not an anomaly. That's an epidemic. And studies show that victims range from 53 to 104 years old. Think about that. It doesn't matter how old you are, how experienced, how smart. Anyone can fall victim to financial exploitation, to emotional abuse, to the kind of systematic destruction I experienced. But here's what else I learned. It's never too late to fight back. Never too late to reclaim your life. Never too late to start over. I thought I was too old at 24. I was wrong. I thought I was powerless. I was wrong about that too. The only thing standing between me and my freedom was my willingness to walk away from what was familiar, even if that familiar thing was killing me. If you're reading this, if something in my story resonates with you, please hear me. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not too old, too tired, too broken to change. You are exactly as strong as you need to be. You just need to remember that strength, dust it off, and use it. Document everything. Keep records. Don't let anyone isolate you from people who love you. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Protect your assets. Keep your own accounts. Know where your money goes. And most importantly, know that you deserve better than scraps of affection from people who should be giving you their whole heart. The funeral programs on my shelf remind me now of something different than they used to. They're not just memories of people I've lost. They're reminders that life is short, that we don't get unlimited time to figure things out, that every day we spend in situations that diminish us is a day we can never get back. I spent 10 years mourning a man who wasn't dead while slowly dying myself. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm living now. Actually living. And it feels like the most rebellious, radical, revolutionary thing I've ever done. So here's what I want to ask you. Are you staying somewhere you shouldn't be? Are you telling yourself you're too old to change, too tired to start over, too powerless to make a difference in your own life? Because I'm here to tell you that you're not. You're exactly where you need to be to make a different choice. Right now, today, this moment, what will you choose? Have you lived this? Do you know someone who has? Leave a comment. Share your story. You never know who needs to hear it. And please, like and subscribe so this message reaches someone who desperately needs it today. You might be the reason someone finally finds the courage to save themselves.